This recording, I'm going to go through the second half of the Year 11 2018 mid-course examination, or half-yearly. So I'm starting with question 21, which requires you to complete a table of material properties. These are four commonly used material properties. The first one is hardness, and the answer I've written in here is to resist scratching, denting, etc. Now, there are some other definitions. It also the ability to resist wear, and the ability to hold a sharpened edge are all good answers, but typically we go for hardness is the ability to resist scratching, and I would say if you're ever asked in an exam to name a mechanical property, that's a good one to go with. Hardness is a really easy one to get right. The next one is the ability to be deformed. Now, some people said ductility, some people said malleability. Both of those are a kind of plasticity. Malleability and ductility are specific kinds of plasticity. Malleability is the ability to be deformed under compression, to be hammered, and ductility is the ability to be deformed under tension, so to be drawn into a wire. Now, the next one is strength. Now, I must have skipped this when I was filling in the answers, but strength is the ability to resist stress. So I'm going to write that in. Now, if someone said the ability to resist loads without failure, I could live with that, but I'm hoping that will go away. I could live with that answer, but stress is the more correct answer, because stress being, as we'll see later, load over area. The last one, this one was answered poorly, which was the resistance to fire, corrosion, and other degradation. That's durability. That's how long something lasts in unspecific terms. So corrosion resistance, fire resistance, or biodegradability, or if something's non-biodegradable, they're all different ways that something can be durable. But for something to be durable, it must be resistant to all of those things. And durability is probably, in a lot of ways, more important than the others. Okay, so moving on to question 22, which is worth 5 marks. The unit of time is seconds. So obviously we use minutes and hours, days, years in our real-world experience, but in science we always convert that to seconds. So distance is a scalar. Displacement is the vector. Acceleration is measured in meters per second squared and is a vector. Temperature is measured in Kelvin and is a scalar. So temperature we obviously measure in Celsius. Kelvin is the SI unit that we should be using. Weight is in newtons. It's a vector. So weight is a force. All forces are in newtons. Compared to mass, which is in kilograms, which we'll see later. Okay, question 23, which is worth 2 marks, a pretty easy question. Steel rail sections are rolled. Aluminium window sections are extruded. Question 24, we're going to name 3 different polymers. So for electrical cables, it's PVC. Polyvinyl chloride, I'd take either. For foam and shoes, so shoes is a bit vague there. So the idea is that you have to be able to pick a material that is used in both products. So foam is the most common. Foam is made from polyurethane, and the shoe uppers are made of polyurethane. As a substitute for leather. I deliberately didn't include shoe uppers because I thought that would add to confusion. So I just thought, well, if you can come up with any other material that is made out of foam, that is used to make foam in a industrial quantity, and any part of the shoe in an industrial quantity, I'm happy to, if someone proves that to me, I'm happy to give them the mark. But the answer you should be thinking about is polyurethane, which is the most commonly used and most commonly referred to thermosetting plastic, thermosetting polymer. Okay, and then we have a lunchbox with a hinged lid. So I made this specific because there's only a few products that have living hinges, which means that the hinge can be opened and closed multiple times without it degrading. And that's polypropylene. Well, though I've written the wrong thing, polypropylene is PP. Some people wrote the numbers. PVC is 3, polypropylene is 5. I wouldn't give the mark for just the number. Whereas if that helps you, I tell you the numbers, not because they're testable, but because I think that's a way to help you to store that information. So polypropylene is the second most commonly used plastic after polyethylene. Okay, question 25 is 2 marks. So if you left out any part of this, there were 3 parts that you need to get 2 marks. If you had 2 of them, you only got 1 mark. cement, which acts as the glue, aggregate, which is the filler, and steel, which is the reinforcing. So it asks for reinforced concrete. So if you said cement and steel, you wouldn't have got the 2 marks. If you'd said cement and aggregates, you wouldn't have got 2 marks. If you said sand and rocks instead of aggregates, you got the marks. So question 26, define the following SI units. Define the following and identify the SI unit. So mass, defining mass. There's 2 definitions that I'll accept for mass. A measure of the amount of matter. So like the song is, mass is a measure of how much stuff an object has. Or it's how hard it is to make, I like to use difficult because hard has a very specific meaning in engineering, how difficult it is to make something start or stop moving. And that's measured in kilograms. Kilograms is a base SI unit. So stress, I am going to simplify it and just say force over area. So if someone said as an alternative, a stress is a push, pull, or twist, no one did, I probably would have given that as correct. But force over area is a nice, very specific way of defining force. Defining stress, which is measured in pascals. Pascals is written with a capital P. I also accepted people who wrote PA as the unit. Okay, work is force times displacement, or force multiplied by displacement. That's measured in joules, which is the capital letter J. Both because these are named after people, the same as Newton's, they are a capital letter. Watts also has a capital letter. Okay, I was tempted to put in something like power, which is watts, and I was tempted to put in forces, but I left it with these ones. So there were a few other ones that I could have used, but these were the ones I thought were the most important for us to test. Question 27. 2 impacts of steam power. Most people got something along these lines. So increase in transportation ability. So the ability, this is the first time that people could move faster than a horse, by and large, without falling, without jumping off a cliff or something. And certainly this is the first time that we could transport things over long distances quickly. So even horses tire pretty quickly. Horses can only travel over long distances at the same speed as a human, whereas time zones weren't really an issue until the steam train. So that until we had trains that were traveling fast, so fast that time zones started to matter, that people would get out of a train that left New York and they'd arrive at Chicago and their watch didn't sync up with the time. That was the first time that really had happened because of the speed of the locomotive. Steamboats were also important, that now we were no longer dependent on sails for transportation over water. The second advantage is industrial power to work machines. So we could argue that transportation is something, is in that same capacity, but I think it's also important to talk about, and transportation of raw materials is really important, transportation of coal, but coal, steel, which were the things that powered the Industrial Revolution. But I think it's also more important to talk about, and I'm willing to accept variations of these, but these were the 2 answers I would give. The ability for machines to be operated by steam, I think, is the second most important. So a lot of people talked about mining and the ability to pump out mines. That's a good answer, but also people talked about the cotton industry, that there was massive improvements in efficiency. Both of those were in the video that we watched when I was away, the Modern Marvels video on engines. Okay, now I will leave the question there. I won't go through question 28 now. I might record me using the board. The fact is that most people in the class answered this question really well. The things that people lost marks for, I tried to write on the page, and I'm happy to go through specifically with people who have lost marks. Things that people lost marks for were, most people got the right shape, the right size. What people had wrong was their orientation, that they didn't necessarily have, it should look like a German or Russian flag, not like a French flag, the direction of the top view. I think most people put the top view in the right spot, but not everyone had their top view, front view, and side views lining up. So that's an important difference. I don't think I took off too many marks for line quality. Most people were able to show a difference between their dark and light lines, and most people either drew a solid line using a rule. Most people used rulers, and that's fine. Where some people did freehand, and it was a single straight line, or a single attempt that was done with done with determination is what I like to think of. So what I don't like to see is feathered lines, and if someone has done feathered lines, I'll usually say don't do this, and I'll indicate what a feathered line is and the difference between the two lines. So I think that's labeling. I think everyone labeled more or less okay. I think there were some people who their label was a little bit off, and maybe their line work was a little bit off, and I took off, say, 1 mark, so half a mark each, and to make it 1 mark. Your line work should be all capitals. Your lettering should be all capitals, and it should be 5 millimeters tall. So that's the standard set out by the Australian standards and reinforced by the Victorian government as well. The document that I posted for you guys. So that's some guidelines. The lettering didn't have to be between lines. It just had to be a reasonable attempt at neat capital letters of sufficient size. Okay, hopefully that helps people. If anyone's got a specific question they want me to go through, I'm happy to do that. I'll also go through this one more time with the class, where I'll talk about how our class did relative to what our average was for the class. Okay.